As the UK's ambassador to the US. And police in the US state of Arizona believe the missing mother of American senior news anchor Savannah Guthrie is still out there 5 days after she vanished. And coming up on Business Today, Amazon shares plummet as investors worry about the tech giant's mammoth spending plans. You're watching Newsday, and we begin this hour with more fallout from the Epstein scandal. The congressman who called for the full public release of the Epstein files has spoken exclusively to BBC News, saying Peter Mandelson and the former Prince Andrew should face questioning in the United States. Ro Khanna, a member of the House Committee on Oversight and Accountability, who spearheaded the Epstein Files Transparency Act, has been speaking to my colleague Katrina Perry in Washington.
This scandal reaches far beyond these shores, as you know, and it has cost others their political careers, their reputations in the UK. The former Prince, Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor, the former US ambassador from the UK, Peter Mandelson as well. Would you expect those two individuals, or do you want to see those two individuals come here to the US and be questioned, tell you what they know?
Absolutely. They should appear before our committees. I mean, I understand that the prince was stripped of his title, but that seems to be the least of the consequences given what I've seen. There are a lot of unanswered questions. And Mendelson, my concern with Mendelson is not just the abuse of underage girls that took place on the island. My concern is the allegations that he gave sensitive information to Epstein. I mean, the allegations that have come out in these emails that he was working for Gordon Brown, and then he allegedly transfers sensitive information about what Gordon Brown was going to do to bail out Europe after the recession, and Epstein perhaps could have traded on that information. It goes to the fundamental anger of populism, not just in America, but around Europe and around the world, that a group of rich and powerful people, I call them the Epstein class, are rigging the rules, protecting themselves, while ordinary people in America are getting shafted, while ordinary people in Britain are getting shafted.
Now, both men deny any wrongdoing. Can you compel them to come here and testify?
Well, we can subpoena them. I suppose they can defy a subpoena, but you know, the British Prime Minister, I assume, would want to have senior people comply with American Congress subpoenas. I mean, Britain is our closest ally. We have such intelligence sharing. We have such trust with Britain. It's not just that that he may have shown up to an island where young girls were being raped. That's bad enough, and we don't know. I mean, he needs to be asked whether he did. It's not just that he was corresponding with a convicted pedophile. It's that there are allegations that he shared sensitive information about the global financial markets with Epstein for personal profit. I mean, that goes to the core of trust between our countries.
Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor has always denied any wrongdoing. Lord Mandelson has not responded to requests for comment, but the BBC understands his position is that he has not acted in any way criminally and that he was not motivated by financial gain. He argues that he sought Epstein's expertise in the national interest during the 2008 global financial crisis. Now, the Epstein saga has also raised questions about the British Prime Minister's judgment and whether he can last in Downing Street. Sir Keir Starmer has apologized to Jeffrey Epstein's victims, saying he was sorry for appointing Lord Mandelson as ambassador to Washington and for believing what he called his lies about the true extent of his relationship with the paedophile.
The victims of Epstein have lived with trauma that most of us can barely comprehend. And they've had to relive it again and again. They have seen accountability delayed and too often denied. To them, I want to say this: I am sorry. Sorry for what was done to you. Sorry that so many people with power failed you. Sorry for having believed Mandelson's lies and appointed him.
One of the survivors of Jeffrey Epstein spoke exclusively to BBC Newsnight and gave their reaction to the Prime Minister's apology.
how do you react to the British Prime Minister apologising to you for appointing a friend of Epstein when he knew the friend of Epstein that had been convicted for child sex trafficking? How do you feel about the British Prime Minister apologising to you and other survivors?
You know, first I have to say I have to commend him for going, on national television and admitting that he was wrong and apologizing to us. I think that's a huge step, right? You have also people here in America that have not even tried to apologize to us. So I have to commend him for that. And, it definitely, we have to take this apology into consideration because we did warn him, we did tell him that these things were happening. And I think now moving forward, we have to worry about what kind of justice will be brought here.
In other news, the United States and Russia have agreed to resume high-level military dialogue after 4 years. It's the first sign in a potential warming of relations between the two countries and militaries after things deteriorated in the run-up to Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. It was agreed on the sidelines of Ukraine peace talks in the UAE, although those negotiations in Abu Dhabi ended without a major breakthrough. The main sticking points are believed to be around potential territorial concessions and security guarantees. However, Russia and Ukraine did agree on an exchange of prisoners of war. 157 Ukrainians, 7 of them civilians, and 157 Russian soldiers have returned home, the first such swap in 4 months. Well, for more on this, I'm joined by Peter Dickinson, editor of Ukraine Alert at the Atlantic Council. Peter, thanks for speaking with me about this today. Firstly, what do you make of US and Russian militaries resuming dialogue?
Well, I think on the surface, it's a positive development. It's certainly encouraging from a global security perspective that these two major powers are once again going to be in more direct contact on key security issues. But from a specifically Ukrainian point of view, there will be concerns here that perhaps the Russians are looking to have some sort of a thaw with the Americans, or perhaps to sidetrack the Americans and to re-engage with Washington whilst bypassing the Ukraine issue, as it were, to push the Ukraine issue down the agenda and to create some sort of a dialogue above and beyond or outside of the context of efforts to end the Russian invasion of Ukraine. We're also seeing similar talks, not on security, but in economic terms, about potential cooperation between Russia and the US, which also have set off some alarm bells in Ukraine, where people are saying very much, look, this is the biggest war, the biggest invasion in Europe since World War II. It has to be the top priority and it needs to be resolved. So, of course, contact between Washington and Moscow are potentially very, very helpful, but they should be in the context of trying to address what's happening here in Ukraine.
Yeah, it does seem a rather strange time for those talks to be happening, or for those dialogues to be resuming. Just coming back then to the discussion of Ukraine, the sticking points that have been for quite a while now center around security guarantees and territorial concessions. It doesn't seem like either side are going to move on either of those things.
Well, certainly, the most recent round of talks that finished yesterday, there was a lot, there's been an attempt to put a positive spin on them. The Ukrainians, the Americans have been saying how constructive they were, that they managed to discuss quite practical matters in terms of a potential, future, the details of some sort of a ceasefire, how it might be implemented in practical terms. But the big political issues remain very much unresolved. We actually saw from the Russian side, again, an official rejection of any sort of a European troop presence in Ukraine, which the Ukrainians see as crucial for security guarantees. They feel that without, if security guarantees are just written exactly, essentially a piece of paper, so to speak, then they're not going to have any credibility. So the Ukrainians insist on some sort of military presence, and Russia says, no way, we're not going to have that. Also, there are reports that in the Russian state media, that Russia now is not only demanding control over the whole of the Donbas region in East Ukraine, it's also now expecting Ukraine to officially cede the territory and to recognize it. So not just de facto control, but de jure legal control. That's out of the question, I would say. So again, it looks like the Russians may be moving the goalposts and underlining their uncompromising stance.
Peter, thanks for giving us that context. Appreciate your expertise on this. Peter Dickinson, editor of Ukraine Alert at the Atlantic Council. The White House press secretary says President Trump is looking for a deal with Iran during talks between officials in Oman on Friday. Washington wants negotiations to include Tehran's ballistic missiles, but the Iranian regime has said the sole focus must be on its nuclear program. Iran's foreign ministry spokesman said his country hopes the American side will participate with responsibility, realism and seriousness. The talks come after U.S. military buildup in the region and threats of strikes following Tehran's violent crackdown on anti-government protests across Iran. And one of the most famous faces on morning television in America, the NBC News anchor Savannah Guthrie, has made a tearful appeal for the safe return of her mother, who disappeared from her home 5 days ago. Arizona police believe Nancy Guthrie is still out there, though they have yet to identify a suspect. Meanwhile, the FBI is offering a $50,000 reward for information. Our North America correspondent, Neda Tawfiq, has the latest from New York.
Millions of Americans tune in each day to start their morning with Savannah Guthrie. The longtime anchor is a likable fixture of the country's most popular morning show. Her sudden absence on screen and the subsequent mystery of her mother's disappearance has shocked and gripped the nation. As the disappearance of Nancy Guthrie stretches into a fifth day, investigators, including the FBI, have renewed their search for clues at her Arizona home.
Our mom is our heart and our home.
Overnight, the 84-year-old's three children posted an emotional plea for their mother's safe return. Savannah Guthrie said the family had heard about an unverified ransom note and spoke directly to the possible captor.
We are ready to talk. We need to know, without a doubt, that she is alive and that you have her.
Adding to their worry, their mother is without her essential medication.
Her health, her heart is fragile. She lives in constant pain. She is without any medicine. She needs it to survive. She needs it not to suffer.
Nancy Guthrie was last seen Saturday evening at her home in an affluent neighborhood northeast of Tucson after having dinner with her daughter Annie and her son-in-law. Today, police released a timeline they've drawn from the night. At 9:50 p.m., her garage door closed. Hours later, at 1:47 a.m., her doorbell camera was disconnected. And at 2:28 a.m., her pacemaker disconnected from her phone app. On Sunday, she never turned up for church, and that's when her friends alerted her family and they discovered she was missing. When law enforcement turned up at her home, they said what they encountered caused grave concern. Videos from the scene show a trail of blood on the porch that was confirmed to be Nancy Guthrie's.
We have not identified a suspect or a person of interest in this case. We are working our best to do that.
I think it's terrible.
President Donald Trump has spoken with Savannah Guthrie and has directed all federal law enforcement to help the family and local authorities get her mother home safely. With so many questions and few leads to explain what happened to Nancy Guthrie, her family and close friends have gathered in prayer, hoping for a breakthrough and good news. Neda Tawfiq, BBC News, New York.
More ahead. Around the world and across the UK, this is BBC News. You're live with BBC News. Now, millions in Thailand will head to the polls on Sunday to elect the country's fourth leader in 3 years, amid a tumultuous period of political instability and fragile coalitions. This election is seen as a three-way fight between the royalist military establishment, represented by the Abum Jai Thai Party, the progressive opposition led by the People's Party, and the populist Pheu Thai Party linked to the powerful Shinawat clan. Our Southeast Asia correspondent Jonathan Head has more on what we can expect.
They call themselves the People's Party. Their candidates making special efforts to reach the voters. Maki Potasak gave up his job in TV production to campaign for the party in Thailand's northeast. With its promises of sweeping reform, he won the seat here 3 years ago and hopes to do so again.
We are just ordinary people you could meet on any street, but with a real determination to solve problems in this constituency. I think the villagers here can see that.
One of his encounters illustrates those problems. Arm is about to lose his job. The factory where he works is closing this year. I only have basic education, he said, and low-skilled jobs are now leaving Thailand.
The realisation, even in small rural communities, that the old ways of politics are not solving Thailand's deep economic challenges is giving a real boost to the popularity of the young reformists outside the big cities. But they know from bitter experience that even if they come first in this election, they may still be barred from forming a government.
The party's wealthy and idealistic founder has joined the campaign. Like many of his colleagues, he's been banned from political office, with 2 previous incarnations of his party dissolved by the courts. Powerful conservative forces in Thailand don't want them in government.
They are afraid of us, they are afraid of change. They want, tomorrow to be just like yesterday. They think by dissolving our parties, by banning our leaders from politics, would make us smaller. In fact, we are getting bigger. And I think this time we are ready to run the country, to make a change come true.
Will they let you?
That's the problem. We'll see.
Incumbent Prime Minister Anutin Charnvirakul is running on a patriotic theme, promising to defend Thailand's borders after the recent clashes with Cambodia, praising the army, which has so often overturned democracy here. But the young candidates of the People's Party believe their campaign will resonate better with an electorate that knows Thailand needs change. Opinion polls suggest they're right. History, though, warns that they may once again be blocked, however well they perform at the ballot box. Jonathan Head, BBC News, northeastern Thailand.
And Jonathan joins me now from Bangkok for more on this. Jonathan, you mentioned there that parties that finish first don't necessarily aren't able to form government due to the court. So there's the Constitutional Court, isn't it, that holds quite a bit of sway in Thai politics. So help us understand that better.
Yeah, it's enormously powerful. I mean, these independent bodies were set up about 30 years ago with the idea that they would hold corrupt politicians to account. But in practice, they've become weaponized by a very conservative establishment that wants to control what kinds of parties are allowed to come to power. The Constitutional Court has dismissed 5 sitting prime ministers. It's dissolved dozens of parties and banned hundreds of politicians, almost all of them from the reformist or anti-status quo side. So everyone knows where it stands. There are other institutions too, though, that should be looked at. The National Anti-Corruption Commission, which is supposed to fight corruption, currently has a case against the People's Party, which could see 44 of its members banned from politics over their advocacy of softening the Royal Defamation Law, which the court has judged to be, in effect, an attempt to overthrow the entire political system. It's an enormously powerful institution. It really is, some people say, these institutions that decide who governs Thailand, not the voters who go to the polls.
Yeah, and with that in mind then, with the strength of these institutions, could there be any different outcome than there has been previously?
I think there could be. I mean, I think it depends how well the People's Party does. If they do significantly better than last time they were just 10 seats ahead of the next party per Thai. But if some of the polls suggest they could get 200 seats. Now, no one's going to get an outright majority. No polls are predicting that. There are 500 seats in the parliament. But getting 200 or plus, it would be very hard then to block them from attempting to form a coalition. But of course, as we've seen over the past 3 years, just getting into government, and they would need to be in coalition with somebody, is only the start. We've had two prime ministers dismissed by the Constitutional Court once they got into government. That was from the Purtai side in the last 2 years or so. So the courts remain the guardians of how you govern, of what's acceptable. And so it's possible we might see a People's Party, a reformist young party, taking power really for the first time in Thailand's history. But then the question would be, will it be allowed to govern? Will it be allowed to implement these really sweeping reformist policies that it argues Thailand badly needs with this sort of catastrophically falling population and stagnating economy? Will it even be allowed to stay in office, or will it see its prime ministers or its leaders dismissed, as we've seen so often in the past?
Yeah, thanks very much, Jonathan, for giving us that context. A lot to dig into with this election in Thailand on Sunday. Thanks very much. Southeast Asia correspondent there, Jonathan Head. Now, President Trump has again broken with tradition, offering his total endorsement of Japan's Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi and her ruling bloc ahead of Sunday's general election there. In a post to social media on Thursday, Trump said he was extremely impressed with Takaichi, who he met during his October visit to Japan, saying the results of the election would be very important to the future of Japan. And the endorsement is believed to be the first time that a U.S. president has offered such implicit backing of a Japanese leader or political party in an election. Now, for more, we can speak with Ken Jimbo, Managing Director at the International House of Japan. He previously served as a special advisor to Japan's Minister of Defense. Ken, thanks for speaking to us today. Firstly, what do you make of President Trump endorsing the Prime Minister for this election?
Well, as you mentioned, it's very unusual. Sitting U.S. presidents almost never openly endorse a leader in allied democracy during election. And what this tells us is that Trump definitely sees Takaichi as someone he trusts and feel aligned with, especially on the security and the strategic issues. So it brings the U.S.-Japan alliance much more directly into domestic politics than we usually see in Japan. And I think also the timing matters. Trump also mentions that he's looking forward to having a Takaichi planned her visit to Washington, D.C. In March. And this is also very important. Going to Washington, D.C. first allow Japan to engage the United States before Trump sits down with a Chinese leader, which is expected in April. So that in that timing, I think from the White House perspective, there will be a lot of like a diplomatic leverage to Japan, what wants to achieve in relation with Japanese leaders, and that will be the timing that she wished to be the leader who will be the counterpart of the Trump.
And Ken, given how unusual this is for this endorsement to be given, how is it playing out in Japan? Will it make a difference, do you think?
Well, I think it doesn't really matter too much to the actual election result. But I think at the latest poll shows that it is quite likely that LDP, which is the ruling party, will come out of this election with a single party majority. And then again, that the big part of that is the Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi herself, and her popularity has held up because she's seen as a clear and decisive, and particularly on the leadership and security, and at the time of the international environment feel very uncertain. And she also moved quickly and called the election while the support was still strong, and which helped turn personal approval into the election momentum. I think at the Trump endorsement, which will really have a force multiplier on this trend.
All right, Ken, thanks very much. We'll have to leave it there, but thanks so much for giving us that context. Ken Jimbo, Managing Director at the International House of Japan, also previously served as Special Advisor to Japan's Minister of Defense. Now, the first ever permanent Pokemon theme park has opened in Japan. Pokepark Kanto is based within Tokyo's largest amusement park, Yomiuri Land, aiming to capitalize on Japan's record tourism boom. The park has two areas, a Pokemon forest described as a spacious wilderness where visitors can try to catch them all, and an area for shopping and rides. You'll also be able to see all of your favorite characters, including, of course, Pikachu. But don't rush there right away. Tickets are already sold out for the next 2 months. Now, it was an astonishing find, a preliminary sketch by Michelangelo for a tiny section of his painting on the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel. It's now sold at auction for $23 million, 10 times the original estimate. The drawing of a foot 5 inches high in red chalk and thought to date back to around 1511, was discovered in a private collection. Christie's in New York say the unsuspecting owner submitted a photograph for an auction estimate only to discover the sketch's true value. And we'll leave you with these live images from Milan, where it's almost 5:30 in the morning on the day of the opening ceremony of the Winter Olympics. And this is Milan's Duomo in the center of the city. And this evening, not far from here at the San Siro Stadium, we'll see the official start of the 25th Winter Games. They're being held across Milan and the ski resort of Cortina to the north. And there will also be ceremonies and parades held there, and the Olympic flame will light cauldrons in both locations to officially open the Games. I'll see you next on Business Today. See you soon.
It's Empire's 50-50-50 sale, up to 50% off select